I feel that there's a spirit in trees that's very deep, and I'm somewhat of a druid that way. I especially when it comes to something extraordinary, I find the spirit just bouncing up and down in the grain of a tree. So there is that relationship. I have essentially no interest in furniture as such. I mean, I would find it impossible to try to design a chair out of plastic or metal or plywood. I'm not in that kind of spirit. But I do feel that in order to produce a fine piece of furniture, the spirit of a tree lives on. And I can give it a second life. It's something like the medical profession. But I think this is, in a way, even more realistic and deeper than what the medical profession can do, because I can make an object that lives and can live forever, possibly, if used properly. So that's my objective, and that's my happiness, is to find this relationship with a tree.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of your favorite podcast, Woodworking is Bullshit. I'm your host, Paul Jasper, scientist by day, woodworker by night, and I'm joined by your two amazing, fabulous co-hosts, Eric Curtis, full-time furniture maker and content creator, and Mary Tsai, Mary Tsai,
Thanks.
Adobe UX designer by day, contemporary furniture maker by night. So, today we have an exceptionally unique and important episode of what we call the Master Series, because throughout history, there's only a few individuals who have single-handedly influenced the landscape of furniture design. So I'm referring to names such as Chippendale, Stickley, Maloof, Nakashima. And part of me doesn't even believe what I'm going to say now, but today on the podcast, we have Mira Nakashima and her grandson, Toshi Amagasu. And for those of you who might not know, Mira is not a distant relative of the famous George Nakashima. She is, in fact, his daughter. And also the president and creative director of George Nakashima Woodworks. So Mira and Toshi, we cannot thank you enough for giving us and the listeners the gift of your time and your thoughts on today's episode.
What's up? That was very, I don't know, professional.
You try.
You guys
I like the title of creative director, Mira. That's like that feels good. That feels like a strong title.
Well, I stole it from my friend who's a musical director. She has a chamber music group, and she calls herself the creative director. She programs it, and she's the cellist who's the foundation of the group. So I thought, well, that's kind of appropriate. It's rather better than just director or CEO or
Sure.
president.
I'm going to borrow that now too.
Whatever.
All right, so let's begin by bringing any listener who may not already be familiar with George Nakashima into the fold by defining the Nakashima ethos and furniture. And everybody knows who listens to this show how much Mary loves her definitions. Mary,
I love them.
as an engineer, Mary loves to have things properly defined. So I thought, because Nakashima Furniture legacy, I think, is so big and difficult to define in a single sentence, I thought we could actually have some fun with this and sort of make a game out of it. And what I'm going to do is give each of us one sentence to give our definition of what Nakashima is to us, including Toshi and Mira. Now, it goes without saying that I think all of our definitions are going to be incomplete, right? Because that's the beauty of the game. You know, you can't really summarize into one sentence, but taken as an ensemble, I think all of our definitions together will give the listeners some idea of what it really means. And then, of course, at the end, Mira will just tell us what the real answer is. And Mira, you're not down to the one sentence rule. Toshi, you are. Sorry about that, kid. All right, so I'll go first. All right. All right. All right. So one sentence. Through a deep devotion to nature and spirituality, George Nakashima inspired the world to see how beautiful slabs of wood could be when they couldn't see it for themselves, and is in my mind, therefore, the father of modern slab furniture.
Wow.
That was, I believe, what Toshi was talking about in the
That's got to be a
pre-call.
tangent.
That, like,
That's gotta be a tangent.
Yeah, we got to go
high
back to
school-
grammar school. There
No,
were
my
subclauses to
English
the
teacher would
subclauses.
destroy you.
It was good.
Okay.
It was beautiful. It was poetic, but
No,
it
that was
was
great.
it was,
It was.
a technically two
Okay,
sentences.
Eric, hot shot, your turn.
All right. I took a different route. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. And I thought more about the legacy of like Nakashima Furniture as I know it and how I learned about it when I was in school. And what I came up with is a handcrafted sentiment on a production scale, which is really interesting to me because it's really hard to hit that sweet spot. I don't think many people do it. And I don't know, in fairness, the scale of production you guys are actually putting out. Like, I don't know how many pieces a year you're making, but I think it's fair to call it a production shop. And yet each piece is an individual handcrafted piece. So that's where I landed.
Weren't you just saying the run-on sentence?
Well,
Yeah.
my sentence, I defined
gave-
my definition.
Okay.
Yeah, but wait, you got to like explain everything about your sentence. Like I just did the
That's
sentence.
the beauty of keeping it brief, Paul.
Oh, whatever. Double standard. Okay, Mary.
Okay, I also kept it brief, and in a similar vein of Eric, my definition is more about how I've interacted with Nakashima's work. So for me, I think Nakashima's furniture is about creating pieces that enhance life's natural rhythms.
Wow, I
Nice
like
and
that.
Nice.
I could
No, it was beautiful.
go on, but
Dip out
that's
while
it.
you're ahead. That was great.
All right, Toshi, you ready?
Well, for me, I've been surrounded by all this stuff my entire life before I even knew it was even remotely significant. So to me, definition of our work is just make good stuff.
Mm.
Because I feel like it's accurate.
It's kind
I
of like
like
Eric's
that.
T-shirt. Go make
I
a thing,
like that,
except it
too.
has
Like,
to be a
that's-
good thing.
Yeah, like that's akin to the motto I have. Just make a thing. It doesn't matter what the thing is. Just make something, but just make a good thing. That's
Well,
like taking it up a notch.
We've got customers to deal with, so it has to be a good thing.
Yes.
That's fair.
All right. And Mira, you're not bound by the single sentence unless you'd like to, but
Oh.
if you could give us
I
your
thought it was.
definition.
Well, I thought I was only going to have to produce one sentence.
Well, you can. Let's start with that.
My sentence was Nakashima Woodworking is a way of life.
Oh, your headphone fell out.
Oh.
You got that right. It's a way of
Yeah.
life.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a way
good.
of life. Absolutely. So, okay, now Mira, that's a very profound single sentence. Now, can you elaborate like more broadly on your definition?
Well, I'd have to go back to Dad, who came up with this idea in the beginning. He, like Mary and me, studied architecture, and he practiced architecture for 7 years abroad. He was in India and Japan, and he came back to the USA and saw the way they were doing architecture in the USA and decided he didn't want to be an architect anymore. So he started making furniture. And he did work with Anton and Noemi Raymond, and theirs was a full-service architectural firm. They did the interiors as well as the exteriors. And so it wasn't a foreign language for him, but he just picked it up and ran with it and decided he wanted a product that he could control from beginning to end, from the material itself through dealing with the client directly and making it and delivering it and just so he would be happy at the end of the day. He didn't have to compromise. So that's
Okay.
basically what we're still doing. That's why I say
So
it's a way of life.
no, I love that. So you also mentioned, the various phases of his life abroad. And it
Mhm.
seemed like from watching, or from what I've learned about your father's life, and there was this period of him searching for himself, searching for what's important to him, searching for where his passion was. And could you take the listeners through the major locations and what he found about himself and his philosophy in each location?
Well, that's a tough question because I wasn't there and he didn't talk about it much. I wrote a book called Nature, Form, and Spirit in 2003. And part of the reason I wrote that is I was trying to figure out why Dad did what he did and why I was doing what I was doing. And so I did explore some of the roots. He, in one of the significant stories in his life, I guess he was maybe 15 to 18. He was a Boy Scout, became an Eagle Scout, loved to hike and camp in the Pacific Northwest, and at that point fell in love with trees. So when he went to college, he majored in forestry for 2 years. Then, for some reason, and no, he never told me why, he switched from forestry to architecture, and he'd been really good at drawing things, I guess, during his earlier years because he was really good at drawing when he was in university, and he won a scholarship to France at the École des Beaux-Arts, and he also won a scholarship to Harvard Graduate School of Design. And I think the École was a continuation of the Beaux-Arts tradition for him. He did a lot of sketching and etching and painting and drawing and exploring the tradition that was offered to him. And then he went to Harvard and decided that he'd rather, if he were in architecture, he would be much happier learning how to build and construct and engineer things. So he switched to MIT from Harvard after 2 weeks. And he graduated in 1930 at the height of the Depression. And let's see, how old would he have been? He would have been 25 then. And he worked as a mural painter for a while, and then he ran out of work. So he sold his car and bought a steamship ticket around the world, went back to Paris and bummed around there, and lived the life of a starving artist for several years until he decided it was the end of the Western world and went on to Japan, the land of his ancestors. And by that time, his father said, I think it's time you got a real job. So he did get a real job with Antonin and Noemi Raymond. And as I said, they did the full service architecture, not just the buildings themselves, but the interiors. So he had that experience. And they sent him to supervise the first reinforced concrete building in India in 1936, and that was an adventure in itself. And but he got there, and he was at the Sri Aurobindo ashram, and he said he'd found what he was looking for. He'd been sort of looking for himself all those years, and he found what he was looking for finally, and decided to stay in the ashram for the rest of his life. Um, Unfortunately, the war broke out, and then he had second thoughts and thought, well, maybe I better get back to my family in the USA. So he went back by way of Japan, and happened to run into my mother, who was brought up in Seattle as well. And they became engaged and were married in Los Angeles, went up to Seattle, and Dad started his furniture business in the basement of the Maryknoll missionaries, and because he didn't have enough money to buy machinery, and in exchange for teaching the young men of the community how to do woodworking. The priest in charge of the Maryknoll missionary was his name was Father Tibisar, and he was ministering to the Japanese American community, and he followed us all when we were incarcerated in the Idaho desert in 1940, right after I was born, 42.
Mhm.
And so I don't know, what his thought processes were, but he said he found himself at the ashram. And then I
Mhm.
think he found himself again when they were incarcerated. I mean, they were on a desert, and my mother was not at all happy. Um, but Dad was, he's a good camper, and he found a Japanese carpenter to work with, and worked alongside him, and he was just grateful that he had that experience, not only of learning how to use Japanese tools and the fine points of Japanese joinery, but learning to experiment with found materials. They didn't have any good materials on the desert, so he would collect bitter brush from the desert, and they would use that as little decorative accents to the furniture they made. And so he learned how to improvise, which was a good thing. And
Now, Mira, philosophically, when he was at these different locations, that was a lovely timeline, by the way. Thank you. When he was at these different locations, like let's say Japan, I recall reading that the Zen aesthetic sort of creeped
Mhm.
into his mind, and the whole spirituality of Shinto. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that was probably crept into his mind more by osmosis than any particular teacher. I don't know that he actually studied Buddhism or Shintoism while he was in Japan, but it was all part of his Japanese heritage. And I think at one point he did say he probably wouldn't do what he was doing except for his Japanese heritage. He had
Hmm.
inherited that
Interesting.
respect for nature and for the forms of nature, and maybe even the spirits of nature. I mean, he wrote this book called The Soul of a Tree, and everybody thought he was a little nuts, but um, including me.
But you really, like, I feel as though you can see those influences of believing in spirituality of nature and of the cleanliness of like the Zen aesthetic in the work. And so, as you said, it must
Yes.
have crept in by osmosis. And when he went to India for that poured concrete job, which was, I guess he had never done such a large job before, and had never attempted anything of that scale. Is that right?
No, he he had built several buildings in. Oops, this thing won't stay in my ear. Sorry. Um, he had built or worked on several concrete buildings and other buildings when he was with the Raymond office when he was
Oh,
in
I see.
Tokyo. But
Okay.
so he learned the technology and
I see.
the building techniques that were necessary for reinforced concrete. But in
I
India,
see.
they didn't have any of the materials. They didn't
Mm.
have any of people who knew how to do that. He had to teach them all, and he had to import all the materials from abroad. So it was, and plus, Mary, I don't know what your experience was with architecture, but a lot of architects are very egotistic, and they want to do their own thing and don't want to listen to anybody else. And Dad
Very
had a tough
accurate.
time with his ego when he was in India, and so the Aurobindo philosophy was to get rid of your ego and let the spirit of whatever, maybe the materials and maybe from a higher power, run through your hands and your mind when you're working, and that's the only way that real work gets done. And I think that was a really what do you call it? It was a catalytic experience to that changed the way he did things.
Is that what you mean when you say he found himself for the first time in India? Is that what you were referring to?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. He himself said he found himself when he went to India, and as I said, he never told me why. I'm just surmising that that's what made a big difference in his life and the way he's thinking about things.
Yeah, I
So,
imagine finding a creative pathway that allows you to, be open to what's happening as you're doing it. I mean, that's a big part of my philosophy, is just like when you're doing the thing, you're allowing ideas to flow to and from with the piece, and you're inputting, but you're getting feedback. And that brings me back. And Paul, I don't mean to dismantle your timeline. You can tell me to
go
stop
ahead.
if you want, but I'm
No, no, go ahead.
curious. A thing you said before about kind of taking in some of these spiritual ideas via osmosis. That's an interesting thing to me, because I think you always take in these design ideas or these aesthetic ideas from, or at least in my experience, from the furniture makers you're around. And I wonder if it's that same kind of thing. Like, he was around these objects and they happen to be based on these philosophies, whether it's a Shinto philosophy in a temple or a Buddhist a philosophy. But ultimately, those philosophies are manifested in objects. And then that influencing his aesthetic later on as those things were developing.
Oh, for sure. Yes. I think there are the materials at hand. There are the people who put things together, and then there are engineers who make it work. And it has to be this consortium of people to make things happen. And I think he learned that a little bit the hard way when he was working on Golconda in India. The mother of the ashram had to guide him pretty firmly and tell him that he was being, he was he was being too egotistic or something, and he needed to get along with this other fellow he was working with, and
Well,
a young man in his 20s. It's hard. Sometimes we need firm love.
You hear that, Toshi?
I've never even. I could never stand somebody with an ego. I'm the most humble person on the planet. That's my favorite statement. The most humble person on the planet.
Well, from these stories, Mira, what stuck out to me is, with some of his moves, especially the move to India, and then back when, after the internment camps, moving to New Hope, Pennsylvania, and just starting a life, kind of building a wall of the first building, like one stone at a time. I heard he was, finding stones on the side of the road and putting them in the back of the car to build. I mean, the word that just kept coming to me is how bold, like fearless in a way. I was just struck by the boldness of these moves, because I feel like today we're so scared to make a move. We're a little conservative, you don't want to take risk. And boy, that was big risk, it seemed like.
Well, making furniture was a risk too, because he hadn't really studied. Well, maybe back then they didn't have something called industrial design. So it was probably most of the design education was through architecture. But when we were put in the camps, and he made the best of that situation. But what happened was his professor from MIT contacted the Raymonds, who had come back to the USA by that time because of the war, and had a farm in Bucks County. And the professor asked them if they would sponsor Nakashima's, so we could get out of camp. And so they did. And they were working on government projects themselves, because they needed work. And they had to guarantee that they really needed a chicken farmer, and that he was not allowed to do any of their architectural projects. So he came over. It was better than being in camp. And after a while, he said chickens and he were not psychologically compatible, but they got him here, and he went on from there. But then he was just kind of puttering around out of the milk house at the Raymond farm, trying to make furniture. And after a while, he did rent a cottage down the road and started his workshop in earnest. With the introduction of the Raymonds, he met Hans Knoll, and Hans and Shu Knoll wanted him to design some furniture that they would mass produce. And he did get some recognition, and as well as some practice. They made, Dad was pretty much by himself. He had like one or maybe two helpers at times, but he would make the prototypes for the Knoll Studios, and then I think he even made some of the early production in his own little shop.
Amazing. So I think that gives us an idea of sort of the path that your father went through, spiritually, conceptually, geographically, monetarily. And what bold moves. I was really struck by but I guess sometimes you don't have a choice. You really just have to step up. And it seems like your father very much stepped up when he had to.
Well, yeah, he had to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, survival.
So can we turn the light now from your father and his design ethos and his philosophy of design about the spirituality of the tree and the clean lines of Zen and the architectural base, and can we shine it on you now? So what would you say is your design philosophy, and is it similar or different or informed from your dad's?
Well, I worked under my dad for 20 years, and I started off, I had 4 young children, so I could only work part-time, and I was basically my mother's gopher in the office in the beginning. And then when I finished up my gopher work, I got to play in the shop, and so I made some of the simpler pieces of furniture, and that was really fun. And then after a while, I got to do some of the drawing. Dad had, up until that point, had done all the drawing, and he was doing these really, really, really sketchy sketches that he would give to the men in the shop. I mean, they were beautiful, but I'd look at him and say, "How can they make anything from that, Dad?" And he says, "Oh, they know how to do it. It's okay." So and I said, "Well, maybe they need a few more details." Because I'd studied architecture, and I was really grateful that I studied architecture in Japan rather than just at Harvard undergrad. Because they were all involved with actually building buildings and figuring out how to build buildings. And most of them were real buildings. It was the atelier system. So we worked with professors who were making things as well as teaching. So that was really good experience. And we had to learn how to collaborate. We were all put into groups of 3, 4, or 5, depending on the project. And they were so patient with me. I had not any kind of drafting when I went to Japan. They had had 4 years of hard drafting. And so I had a lot of catch up to do, not just linguistically, but as technically, I didn't know how to draw a straight line with a ruler practically. So, and plus it was also in metrics. And I'd done all my work in feet and inches and pounds.
So was it that architectural training that largely inspires your design when you design a piece for Nakashima?
Well, I think it was really good training. When I came in, I thought that we needed like 3 views of each piece of furniture rather than just one. I mean, he was a perspective mostly that he did his little sketches with, but I thought I should have 3 different views, the plan and the 2 elevations, um, so that we could put more dimensions on and think through the designs. And um, I don't know, Dad just I and when in 2014, no, it wasn't 2000. Was it 14 when Miriam came? 2007.
I
Remember?
was so young.
Anyway, it was about 17 years ago. I had my first design assistant because I couldn't keep up with everything after Dad and Mother both passed. And I also hired a manager about the same time. And he said, you should record the standards. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. There had been times when we had to make new parts for a chair or something, and I didn't know the dimensions or whatever. And I'd look at the chairs that we made before, and they were all different. And then sometimes we'd make a cabinet, and the outside dimensions were basically the same, but the details were all different. So we started out trying to figure out what the standards were, and then we have those to jump off from when we have a new project. So that's different from what Dad did. I don't know if he just didn't have time to do drawings because he was doing everything. In the very beginning, the office was the shop, and that's where he made the furniture and finished it and everything else. And then when my brother came along, he built another building for the office and for my Aunt Thelma, who came from Japan, and that was 1954. And so she would, she got the office a lot better organized, and Dad just kept on working in the shop and was able to manage everything that went on. But I don't know how. I mean, in the meantime, he was building buildings besides. He wasn't just making furniture, he was building buildings, designing and building buildings, also with no drawings, particularly.
That's crazy to me.
Let's
Oh
make
my
sure there's no
God.
zoners or anything listening.
I was gonna say that
That
feels
was
very much
before
of the
zoning.
time as well, right?
Yeah, that was before
Right.
zoning came to Bucks County, so he got away with it.
So Mira, I'm curious. You got out of architecture school. You came back to work with your father, under your father. Got into the shop, got to do drawings, improve the drawings. It sounds to me like what you were doing is, aside from making your own mark as a designer on the business, you were implementing business strategies successfully to help the business move along, into the 21st century. And I, as somebody who runs a small business in the furniture world,
Mhm,
I'm very aware that being a good designer, being a
mhm.
good woodworker, and being a good business person are three very different skill sets. And
Right.
you went to school to learn how to be a good designer. You learned the tricks of those traits. When did you learn how to be a business person? Like
I never
when did
did.
that come about?
I never did. My mother used to manage all the business and end of it, and she tried to make me help her in the office. I wasn't very good at it. And after she died, we hired a bookkeeper to take care of the books. And I don't know. I just kind of wung it. I didn't have any
See,
plan.
Paul, there's value in winging it.
It's really that Venn diagram of woodworker and designer and business person. It's just like it's a unicorn that sits in the center of all
Right.
three of those.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, is
Right.
Mira at the center?
Yeah.
She leans towards artist and designer. I think.
Yeah.
That's why we have manager.
Yeah,
So-
when I hired my first assistant designer, I also hired a manager, and he kind of took over the strategic planning kind
Yes,
of
the
part of
business
it.
savvy.
Yeah.
The business end of things.
Mhm.
So, your mother doesn't get mentioned as often, at least, in the furniture conversation of it. But like you just said, your mother was running the business end of things. And it sounds,
She
at least
was.
from what you've said from your perspective as a child, like your dad was kind of the scatterbrained artist, just making things and drawing things on the wall and people were making it. And your mom was like, hey, we have bills to pay. How
Yeah.
are we going to make this happen? So
Right.
what was that experience like? Like what was working with and under your mother as a child like, and what are some of the things that you learned from her?
Well, I do remember as a child there were a lot of fights in the house.
Mm,
Um, People would argue about this and that, and I remember there was one conversation. Mother would write down the schedule. I mean, she was also the scheduler, and Dad would decide to make what he wanted to make in the shop, and she'd go, "George, this is the schedule. This is 1, this is 2, and this is 3." And then Dad would go off and do something else. So it was a good balance.
Sounds like a perfectly functional relationship.
So but that brings up like one of the things I wanted to really, I was wondering about is like, what was that tension like? Because again, running a small business is hard, and like especially I can only imagine running it with your partner, with your spouse. So as from your perspective as a child, like, did you know that your father would have this type of impact on the furniture world? Did it feel like it was growing, like it was big, or did it feel like a struggle?
No, it was, well, of course, it was the only family I ever had. So I didn't know
Sure.
that other kids had different kinds of families. um, I was an only child for 13 years. And Dad always had the business right. I mean, the shop business right practically in the house, or next to the room, right smack dab next to the house anyway. So I was always underfoot, either in the shop or in the house. And, they would, so there was, and I think that was partly from his experience in India. They talked about and taught the integral yoga, in which one does not separate one's work from one's life. And and so I think that was his intent on having his furniture business in his living room practically, um, because he didn't want to separate life and work.
And did you enjoy that as it, like, do you have fond memories of like being in the workshop with dad and just like playing, or was it more of a thing of like, well, dad's working and he doesn't want to be bothered and mom wants me to do the books with her, so I got to learn?
No, I never did the books. My brother did. But I was always in the shop, and the fellows in the shop, I don't know what they thought about me. I was the shop pest, but they were my best friends.
Oh.
They were, I didn't have any siblings, so I I played underfoot with the men in the shop.
They're
Yeah.
very happy I've taken that spot.
Yeah.
I was going to ask that. Actually,
Yeah.
Toshi, we were just going to come to that. So, Toshi, tell me what your experience has been like growing up in the Nakashima family.
It's a very unique thing. I think, well, definitely unique. I know that. I've been surrounded by this stuff and been constantly experiencing different things that none of my friends could even relate to remotely.
Right.
And I'm also the beneficiary of literally over 20 employees that are dedicated to making my family's legacy a thing of the future. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people that are interested and learning about my family and learning way too much about me. And so it's a very interesting thing. I truly enjoy it because I have been gifted so many opportunities in my life that I've mostly squandered. But I truly love it. Giving tours ever since I was a kid, traveling the world. I got to go to India to see the rededication of our peace altar over there, which I loved, even though I mostly stared at my iPad the entire trip. It was 2014. I was really young.
You were.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
what would you mentioned giving tours. Now that you're getting older and you've grown up in this ecosystem, and your appreciation for it is clear. Obviously, I think you appreciate it more as you get older. I think all of us, go that way. But
sure.
what would you say has been your unique contribution, or like, to the business? Is it the tours you give? Has that been your favorite contribution? Can you share with us some of that?
The tours I give as like my contribution, I think, is one of my most proud points. I think I give a good tour. I think that people enjoy them, and they also enjoy the fact that they're a very unique, a unique perspective on our work. Because to me, it's less work and more my life.
Yeah.
Because I haven't had to work here for that very long. And so it's I have a very unique perspective. I'm able to bring like kiddish nature and like, oh, this is what I did when I was a kid here, and this is what I do now, and it's very different.
We
was on
had
here
a tour.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Eric.
Paul. Well, Paul, you and I were on different tours, right?
Yes,
you
I
weren't
was on
there.
tours with both of you.
She
separately.
goes there like monthly, apparently now. But
she's one of our regulars.
We both had you on.
We have a
on
punch card
tour.
for her.
And
Regulars.
She's coming up on her free tour.
It's Mary again.
Someone get the stamp.
It really was. That was part of the charm of your tour.
Yeah, for sure.
I've toured a lot of places. I'm a furniture history nerd. And the charm of your tour was very casual. You were like, yeah, here's where we had my 18th birthday party.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
this is where, like I was
so
doing.
cool.
It's just like dumb stuff like that, where it's just like, it made it feel like a family rather than
Yes.
a business
Natural,
or an idea. And that's something that I wanted to ask you about, because you did grow up in this unique position where George Nakashima in the furniture world is a titan, right? He is on Mount Olympus. And you inhabit this world where like that's the case, and then yet you step out of the furniture world, which is a very small world, and nobody knows who George Nakashima is, right? Like he's a titan in, like, he's the biggest fish in a very small pond. So I guess I don't know what that was like growing up in New Hope. Like, do more people know him over there? What was that tension like when you're on the family property and you're like, I'm a Nakashima.
Yeah,
And
do your
then
classmates know?
and
about
then you walk off and
Nakashima
everybody's
at
like,
school
who?
and things like that.
Yeah, the classmates don't care. I'll tell you right now. No one my age knows what's going on over here. But yeah, it's very unique. I mean, I'm like wow, I'm saying a lot of words that mean nothing. We talk to a lot of different artists and a lot of organizations that work for artists. And I recently we had an event where there was a girl that was about my age, but she was the great granddaughter of a different artist, same generation, incredibly talented fellow, but we are in very different situations, and it's just a spin of the wheel, really, of how lucky we are where we're in this position where we have staff that work for us that are able to do this kind of stuff for us, rather than her who literally has to do her archiving herself. Um, and so it's placed me in a very unique man. I'm really lucky and I'm really privileged, and I feel like a mini celebrity whenever I'm walking around. But it's also like no one outside cares.
Yeah, but Toshi, that's
part of it.
That's an opportunity to teach them about how inspiring and exciting
Right.
furniture can
Right.
be.
Yes.
Are you studying? Oh, go ahead.
I also want to say it's really nice to like our staff is like a family to me. A lot of the employees that we've had have been working for us or been with us for longer than I've been alive. To the point where they get angry when they see me because they're like, "Oh man, this kid is an adult now." But I've become really close with them, and I'm really happy that I get to work with them now. So, as
can
an
I ask,
equal.
like, what you're? Can I ask what you're studying in school? Like, what are you?
I'm so undeclared.
Okay.
I'm taking 3 classes this term at our local community college to supplement my work here. So I'm working full time here as well as taking these 3 classes. I just started my drawing class, but I'm also taking a management class and an accounting class. So,
would you say you're more like in the art vein or more in the science analytical vein? Do you have a path showing up yet?
I love art. I have been surrounded by it. It wasn't a choice when I was a kid. I had to love art, and then I developed my love for art. But I am not as much of a creator as other people around me. The word I use for like the great talented artists that I know is obsessed. They are obsessed with their craft. They love it. It's all like it's encumbering how much they think about it. For me, I just don't have that exact same drive, at least yet. And so that's why I work in the sales and public relations department of our company. It's because I'm one of the few people at work that's sociable enough to write emails. But also,
that was a telling laugh, by the way, Mira.
Man, woodworkers are introverts a lot of the time. I don't know what to tell you.
That is true.
But it's also just something that I actually enjoy. So.
Well, so Toshi, I think you just answered this question, at least to an extent, but I want to ask it anyway. Because I think for a lot of woodworkers, there's a moment where you kind of fall in love with the thing and you go like, oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this now, whether professionally or as an all-encompassing hobby, right? Like, this is where my life's path is taking me. Did you have a moment like that? Was there a thing where, like, you were at the house, you saw somebody making a thing, or you just, you saw your grandmother doing a thing, talking to a client, whatever the thing was? Did you have a moment where you're like, I want to be a part of this business?
As far as a moment goes, I don't think so. It's just
I never did.
Yeah.
No?
It's
No.
just a
Osmosis.
billion times where
Osmosis.
you're giving a tour or you're talking to a customer and you enjoy the conversation because, man, our customers are interesting. And you just kind of grow to like it. I've seen my mother talk to customers about 10,000 times, and each time she has the same enthusiasm, which is crazy.
Oh, that's
because,
great.
Man,
Bless her heart.
that's tiring. But I don't know. It just, that's always been something that I've been interested in and attracted to, is just that kind of work. So
I
Well,
have
first
a
of all,
little
you
tangential.
both sound far more emotionally stable than I am, so I applaud you both on that. But I'm curious, Paul, if I can cut your
Yeah, go
question real quick,
Yep.
because I want to. Mira, you said you never had a moment like that either, and it was just through
No,
osmosis that you
I
just ended
just
up
grew
there.
up with it, and well, I guess I never, when I grew up, we never had television. I didn't have any siblings, so I had to play in the shop, and I usually had to figure out what to play with by myself. And there was plenty of sawdust, so I used to play with the sawdust. And when I got older, I got bigger scraps to play with, and it was just, just it's just part of my life. But I never really thought, and in fact, when I graduated from high school and went to college, I thought I would really want to major in music and maybe mathematics, because I was good at both of those. And then Dad said, "Nope, you're studying architecture." And I thought, okay, I guess I can do that. But
Interesting.
it turned out to be good training,
Hmm.
because it did encompass both art and science,
Yeah.
and involved using your hands and your eyes and figuring things out.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's why I majored in it too.
Yeah.
Art, math, science, drawing, creativity. It's like a good blend. I didn't stay in the field, but that's what happens.
I mean, none of the architects here stayed in their field.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think there's something. We still make all of our drawings by hand. I mean, we still
Oh,
draw
wow, okay.
everything with pencils and paper, because I think there is a part of your brain and part of your psyche when you're doing things by hand that's different than when you do it on a computer. It's just like
Sure.
a whole different world, and I don't want to lose touch with that tactile part of making things.
Can I ask, because I obviously came from an architecture background, so I wanted to pry a little bit about your way of designing. So when I'm designing a piece of furniture, because I have the architectural training and I think about, like the environment of the piece, where it's going to be living, how it should fit into the layout and the style. Do you consider that when you come up with your own unique pieces?
Oh,
I
yes,
just
definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Most of what we do is made to order. So, and we usually invite our clients or clients to be to send us scaled room drawings and photographs
Oh,
of
wow.
whatever it is and so forth.
Wait, that's
So we study the
amazing.
environment very carefully. We also ask, we figure out, if they like a particular color or a particular shape or a particular style of table. And then we go out in the lumber shed and see what we can find that is close to that.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a long search, and sometimes it's a short search. You never know when you're going to stumble on the right piece.
I mean, I've seen our
Interesting.
designers, they consider it constantly, like, oh, this would be a great desk for them if it wasn't left-handed. It won't work for the space. Or like, this couch would be perfect if not, if it was a little bit shorter, because it won't fit into their room or something
Sure.
like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous, the amount of, not ridiculous. We are trying to do a good job, but it's a lot of effort.
Yeah, I remember once, many, many years ago, we had a friend whose daughter was an interior designer, and she ordered this cabinet, and then she couldn't get it up the stairs to her apartment.
It's a classic.
We don't want to do
problem.
that.
Yeah, that's a classic Craigslist
Yep.
issue.
Interesting. Okay. And in terms of the designs that you produce, I was curious, like, have you, as you produce your designs for the Nakashima line, like, have you modernized any designs, or would you consider any of the ones that you've produced typically like more modern and of the time, or does that not come into your thinking?
I don't know. My nose is so close to the bench. I don't see the difference. I think when my dad first died, his father was asked that same question. He said, "Well, Mom's designs look more like spaceships than Grandpa's did." So I guess that's more modern. I don't know.
I mean,
that's amazing.
I was I was just in Korea, and I met with one of our clients who works with a bunch of different furniture designers, and I saw the works of a company that's some European country, but their work is very similar to ours, but it's very modern. And it kind of painted a stark contrast between our work and theirs, where they're leaning into like a more current market and like trendy kind of stuff. Where I mean, we just make what we make.
Yeah, and we let the wood be what it is. I think a lot of designers will manipulate it somehow or other, or color it, or change it. But we like to use the materials as they are, and that's a tradition that Dad started.
I did like some of their work, though. They had a standing desk.
Oh, you have to show me pictures.
Yeah, it went up and down.
Okay. We made a desk like that once.
Yeah, we do have some pieces that, like, I don't know. We're making a guitar stand right now. That's
cool.
Oh, that's really
more
cool.
modern than something that we.
So, Toshi, I was going to ask you. You were talking about design now. Toshi, have you designed your own pieces yet? And actually, wait, before you answer that, I'm curious. So if yes, how many? And Mira, how many pieces have you designed that were uniquely you?
Ooh.
I never counted them.
Yeah, we should count
It's just
those,
that many.
honestly. We should have the Mira collection.
Yeah, no,
You really should.
When we did our recent catalog, which is called a process book, there is a page in the back, and the authors of my co-authors thought that we should differentiate which designs were actually mine and which ones were Dad's. So there is a list, and I forget how many are on my list now, but there is a list.
Yeah. I have designed my own furniture in school, in middle school and high school, and now in college when I took my woodworking class there.
That's cool.
Just simple, real basic pieces. I made like a chair in elementary school, and then a little side table, and then I made a bench in high school, which I was actually proud of. None of the other things I've been proud of. And then I have made one Mira chair in my life, which is completely wrong. I did some of the sanding wrong, but it is mine. And that makes it my own unique design.
I do like that you opened with, I designed a chair in elementary school, as though the chair isn't the hardest thing in furniture to design.
Yeah, that's a hard.
That was a good flex. I like that.
It was a simple chair. I'm not going to lie.
Well, sure, but still. Can I ask Mira about your design process? Because Mary and I have, I would say, as close to opposing design processes as could be possible. With her trained architecture background, it is think, iterate, think some more, draw, iterate, draw some more, maybe model, think some more, have a panic attack, then maybe make a piece of furniture.
Accurate, yes.
Whereas I kind of am more like your father, and I do a loose sketch and I go, I'll figure it out when I get there.
Like the panic attack
where do
being
you
scheduled
fall
in.
in your design process? Are you, well, first of all, I'll ask the second question first. Are you at a point now where you've designed so many pieces, you just draw it and you know if it's going to work?
Pretty much, yeah. And I have two assistant designers who do most of the working drawings nowadays, but they always run them by me before they go to the shop. And I think it's just because I've done them so often. I will sometimes change things or modify things. So they'll work. And so far, they've all worked.
Yeah, we haven't had any pieces come back like this isn't physically possible.
Right.
Some of the little tables have been tippier than others, but aside from
right.
Yeah.
Well, and so that brings me to the first question I was going to ask is, do you iterate? Do you model things? Do you make small models or full scale mock-ups to make sure they work? No, you just ride with it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Made a model relatively recently of something small, but no, we don't.
Yeah, my assistant designer did things like that. She created her own table, which we weren't sure quite how to put it together, or how to make it work, or whether it would balance or not. Till we did a mock-up of it, and I thought, oh, we're wasting all this time and material making her design, and then what does she think she is? But it worked out in the end. It was much more complicated to make than most of our structure is pretty simple. It's just you have a couple of joints and to hold it together, and legs long enough to support the top, and you're done.
Simplifies
that's a good way to summarize it. Yeah, it's just a piece of wood with some legs underneath it. That's what a table is.
Yeah. Chair is a little more complicated.
Sure.
What's curiosity? What's the balance of the output? Is it like more tables than chairs, or is it 50-50? Like what's the rough breakdown of your output?
I haven't counted. Do you have any idea?
It really depends on the year, honestly. Well, sometimes it also depends on trends. Sometimes we'll have customers upon customers that are asking for the specific design of a chair, and sometimes we'll have an article that mentions one of our coffee tables, and then we'll have a bunch of those be ordered. So it really depends on the year.
Yeah, but if usually it's pretty well balanced. We have 3 people working full-time in the chair department, and there are how many? There are
6 in the shop.
In the shop.
And then we have 2 in the finishing, and one of them in the finishing is an apprentice. So she's in between shops right now because we have no physical space.
We have a couple of new people in the shop. We sort of bounce them around to wherever we need them.
Cleaning the pool.
I mean, you got to have another birthday party pretty soon.
Yeah. So. Picking up the ice cream.
Yeah, that's Toshi's job. He gets ice cream for the shop in the summertime.
That's very important.
That's not a bad job, man.
No wonder he's so popular.
I am a dictator of ice cream.
That's a great title. Honestly. Ice cream dictator.
Toshi, if you ever write an autobiography, buddy, I feel like that's your title right there.
Yeah, that's
dictator of
one.
ice cream.
Well, so with respect to design, and we'll start wrapping up soon so we can go to our segment feature or fail. I had one last question before we sort of wrap up and ask some sort of big picture questions. One last question about design, which is, Mira, one of the things being in the field so long and you've designed so many pieces, is there a piece in the back of your head that you haven't tried yet that's just sitting there and kind of nagging at you like, try me. I remember Sam Malouf had that. Sam Malouf had that, and it was a chaise lounge. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the last piece he ever made, actually. And he described it as this just, it's back there in the back burner. I just didn't have time to get to it. Do you have any nagging ideas?
No, not really. I know part of the reason we just kept going after Dad passed away is that he had this huge pile of lumber. And I thought, oh my gosh, we just got to keep trying to use it up because it'll go to waste otherwise. Bugs will get it. And I remember once when we were doing our taxes for the year or something, the bookkeeper wanted me to get a tally on the value of the wood. Oh. And Dad told me that wood is worthless to anything until it's made into furniture. So yeah. I figured we should keep chipping away at that pile of wood, and there are pieces of wood in there that are sort of crying out to be made into something, and that is in the back of my mind.
Yeah. There are so many. Did you hear that, Eric?
It sounds like you do the thing I do, or like Paul does sometimes, where like you see a piece of wood and you're like, I know exactly what that is. It's just not the time to do it right now.
That was one of George's abilities that we're lucky enough where she has the same ability, and we have a couple of woodworkers that have it where they literally see a board being sawed at the mill, and they're like, I know exactly what we're going to do with that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
You have that, Mira? You have that vision?
Well, Dad dragged me along to the sawmill for years, so I got used to doing that.
Wow. That's incredible. And I think that's a I don't know if you can learn that. Maybe you can learn that through many years of osmosis, but I do feel like there's an aptitude that is in some people to be able to see the diamond in the rough. And that's a big part of designing successfully in woodworking. So, how do we wrap up? How do you take this huge conversation, and kind of, put it into a sphere. And I'll just start by saying, that the story you told about your dad showed, I think, all of us periods of intense curiosity, trying to find yourself, spirituality, learning who you are, falling into the moments of like unexpected hard circumstances, rising to the occasion, doing what you had to do for your family, taking bold leaps to start something, always thinking big. Like, I don't know, that's just sort of the feeling I get about this story arch that you've told me. And it's so brilliant that you picked up the reins after your dad's passing and have kept the legacy not only going but growing from what he started. It's phenomenal. And so I would ask you, are there, as you look forward now into the future of the business, what do you see? And are there any major goals that you have in your view right now?
Well, we've been having lots of discussions about what comes next, and it always boils down to who's running the show next, or who's going to be the head designer, and and my manager's been really good at making sure that we keep hiring younger and younger people, so that the older people can train them before they retire, and I, right now we have one of the assistant designers studied architecture before he came to us. And I figured that would be handy because there are 15 buildings on the property. They're all getting old. They need to be maintained, and it helps just having somebody who knows architecture on site. But beyond that, he's good at visualizing things and making sure that the structure works. And when I hire my designers, I make sure that they do really nice pencil drawings, because that's really important to me, that they have that artistic ability. They're not just technicians. I mean, a lot of people are good at doing joinery and banging out furniture, but they don't have the artistry. But I think the art is really important, and the skills, woodworking skills, as well as visualizing skills, are important, and humility is really important. Over the years, we've had some people who had a really big ego, and they wanted to do things their way, and they didn't want to do things dad's way, and they didn't last very long. So we right now our manager is really good at hiring, and we have a whole shop full of people who get along really well. And
Oh, that's
the
huge.
beautiful thing is what?
Oh, I didn't say that. He said that.
I said that's
okay.
huge. Having a group of
Oh.
people working in a shop that get along, that
Yes.
makes, like, that comes through in the work.
Yeah, ice cream is a good social lubricant.
Social lubricant. Nice. Toshi, you're wise beyond your years.
Well, I can't exactly buy them beer when they're working.
That's true.
That's
true.
fair.
You don't like beer.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing is that many of the men in our shop have artistic training. They've had art in their backgrounds, so it's not just woodworking that they're familiar with. They're used to art, and our designers have. I also hire people who have had experience in woodworking, so they know how to make stuff. They're not just putting pictures on a piece of paper and telling somebody else to make it. They know how to make it. So it makes a difference, and there's a lot of dialogue that goes on between the design department and the woodworking department, because no matter how well you construct your drawings, it's sometimes different when it gets on the bench, or a piece of it will fall off, or the knot will disappear in the planer, or whatever. There's always things that happen that are different on the bench than they are on your drawing board.
Yeah,
So we're right next to each other. I mean, this is the beauty of Nakashima's too, is that we are an integrated process. The designers are right there. The wood pile is right there. The wood shop is right there. The office is there. The finishing room is there. So we talk to each other a lot.
Great. All right. Two more questions in regards to wrapping up. So, you've been there a long time, Mira.
Mhm.
Did everything go according to plan, or have things gone sideways periodically that you had to correct?
Well, first of all, I didn't have any particular plan. I when I went to college and went to Japan and grad school and married one of my classmates, I didn't think I was ever going to come home again, but I did. And then Dad offered me a job, and my children were young at the time, and my husband really wasn't supporting us completely well, and so we figured, we could use a little extra money. At least I thought we could use a little extra money. He didn't like me working though. He's a traditional Japanese man who thought women should stay home and take care of the kids and have dinner ready when he came home, but that didn't always happen. So we eventually parted ways. So that wasn't according to plan, I guess.
That's true. Eric and I know a little something about that as well.
We can both attest to that. Yeah.
And then John, my current husband, was one of the woodworkers, and he was married to somebody else when he started also. So we parted ways with our spouses about the same time and commiserated about that and became friends, and then we've been together ever since.
What a lovely story to hear.
I know, how cute.
How cute.
I love that one of the people in our field who is held up in the highest regard basically just said, "There's no plan. You just do the thing. You just I think to quote Yoshi Toshi from the early part, you just try to make a good thing. Like that's all there is to it, right?"
Well, Dad's favorite advice to me was the best you can do is the best you can do. And he was a Boy Scout, so you do your best.
That sounds.
Yeah. My mom's favorite statement is just don't mess up.
Yep, well,
that sounds like Mary. Mary, did you say that at one point?
You can't mess up if there is no plan, right?
You can definitely mess up.
All right, the hardest question is for last. Mira and Toshi, individually. For your contribution at Nakashima, what grade would you give yourself? In totality. Thinking in totality, what grade would you give yourself on your career report card?
Don't be humble here.
Be honest.
Should I answer
Be
first?
honest.
Should I give you more time? I'll give you more time. I'm a solid ooh.
Ooh.
Yeah, ooh. I almost gave myself too good of a score, and then I remembered.
I don't know if that's even in the alphabet.
Oh, I invented it just for my grade. I think B minus, B or B minus. I do my job.
Okay.
I do my job, and I do the parts of my job that I'm good at well. But the parts I'm still learning, I'm still learning. So
that's
there's
very
a lot,
wise.
There's a
That's
long
a good
way to
answer.
go.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Very wise. And Toshi, I would agree with Eric's sentiment about your tour. I also had your tour, and it was not lost on me how lucky I was to have a tour from a family member who could be like, "Yeah, I used to play on that cabinet over there. I used to."
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of. I mean, how many tours have all of us been on? Like that aren't like that. It's just mailing
They're
it
very
in, repeating.
dry. Yeah.
Super
Toshi,
dry.
you gave us a view into your family's legacy, and I felt so fortunate to have had that tour with you. So I think your B should be a B plus.
I'd second
Yeah.
that.
I'm just
Hey, you gotta go
rethinking.
somewhere though.
No, I'm going C plus. Actually, I'm going C plus. I got room to grow.
You set the bar low so you can clear it easy. That's wisdom, right?
Ooh,
there.
I'm 5'4". I do need it to be low.
All right, Mira, it's decision time.
Well, I would say maybe a B. Got
I'm
a
going to
long way to go.
respectfully disagree.
Interesting.
Well,
You don't do everything right, and my parents certainly knew that and drilled that into my head. So.
I mean,
Well,
we're lucky.
Go ahead.
We're lucky enough where a lot of the job we have so many employees that do such an incredible job
Yeah.
that we can have gaps in ourselves personally, but together we make an incredible, fantastic team. We should be like the Power Rangers.
That's
That should
fantastic.
be
No, well, what you described is everyone, Toshi. We all have gaps, and we all try to find
Yeah.
ways to make it work, whether it's through the generosity of others that we work with or finding ways to cope with it ourselves. Speaking of which, making mistakes and failing. That's our segment for today. We like to have a segment called Feature a Fail. I think our listeners know that we've done this a few times, where instead of talking about our successes, we talk about a recent failure, because I do think social media gives us an unreasonable bar, because everyone just shows their best work. Everything is fantastic all the time. And you see social media and you say, what's wrong with me? That's not how it feels for me in the shop. But we're, of course, we want to dispel that, because it's not like that for any of us. It's just social media. So Feature or Fail is our attempt to get real with everyone and let them know that they're not alone and we're all making mistakes all the time. Eric, would you like to go first?
And it doesn't have to be woodworking related.
It doesn't have to be woodworking related. This I just thought of this literally 30 seconds ago. So this will be my feature, and it's woodworking adjacent. So Mira, Toshi, I also make videos, put out YouTube videos, and just today I put out a new video for my patrons, and it hasn't even hit YouTube yet. That's not till Saturday. But the whole video, a 20-minute video, is about tapered laminations, bent tapered laminations. And I go through the whole process, designing the piece. I was working with a patron and we build this beautiful thing. It's got these tapered cross braces and doing these curved half laps and mitered the corners. It's a gorgeous piece. And I put the video together. I'm like, this is a great video. And the first thing somebody comments on Patreon was, so the video is about tapered bent laminations. You never addressed how you tapered any of the laminations. You just said that they were tapered, and I was like, how did I not see? I spent 2 days editing this video. How did I overlook the basic fact of they get thinner, but how? So that was
Two in the weeds.
I was too focused on the trees. I lost the forest. Silly mistake.
Oh,
that happens to everyone.
It
Right?
happens to the best of us.
Literally every other email I do. No, I'm kidding.
All right, Mary, you're up.
Okay, mine is from this last weekend, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this on air. I'm not gonna lie, but I was practicing dovetails because I've been trying to get better at them, and I was chopping the tails, and then they looked great. I was super happy, very proud. Took photos, moved on to the pins, and then as I'm trying to put them together, I'm like, these aren't fitting. And then I realized I had chopped 2 sets of tails. That just because I had cut out the wrong part of the wood. I had put an X, but I just completely missed that.
Classic.
So I was like, no, these aren't fitting at all. The worst part, I was like, all right, I got another hour. Let me do it again.
No, you didn't.
And then I mess up again. And then I went home and ordered myself a pizza. I was like, this is it. I can't do it anymore.
That's the most classic woodworking.
So,
Yep.
That's the fail.
Yep, we've all been there. I thought you were going to say you made some shove tails.
Mm.
Another classic.
Is that reverse dovetails?
Shove tail. Yeah, it's instead of wedging them in, they're just like.
All right, I'll go third to give Toshi and Mira time to ready their answers. I was doing a keepsake box recently, and I like on the top lid it floats in a groove, and I like to have bevels on all 4 sides of it, so it's a nice flat, but then it bevels into the slots that it sits in around the box. And to cut those, I sometimes you do those bevels with just a hand plane, and you just make marking lines and just go slow. And sometimes I cut them at the table saw, just to get the primary bevel established. So I'm cutting it on the table saw, and the first couple cuts go great, and I'm like, oh, it's nice bevels, everything's great. And then the third one, it goes into the blade, and it starts giving me this resistance. And I'm like, that's weird. I don't see it catching on anything. And I keep pushing it a little bit. I don't want to force it too much. But I realized it's going down into the throat plate of the saw, it lost its
Oh, no.
contact with the table, and it was going into the gap between the mouth plate and the saw blade. That's why it was giving me resistance. And so not only is the bevel totally blown to hell, but like there's nasty black saw marks up the bevel. And this is like a really, really pristine piece of beautiful English walnut, half of it with like heartwood, all different colors. The other part had like curl to it, and I completely butchered it because I let it go into. I wasn't using a zero clearance insert, and it went down into the saw. Oh God! And it's happened before. I did that same thing before. Yep.
You'll never do it again.
No, I've done it twice
he'll
now.
He'll learn this time.
No, twice is enough.
He won't learn this time.
All right, Toshi, you're up.
I'm flawless.
That's a tough act to follow.
No, it is. I just started my drawing class, and I've been doing my homework for the past few days where I have to draw random objects that I see, doing a lot of, nature stuff because it's what I'm around, and also something that she suggested. And I realized I've been using the wrong kind of pencil this entire time, so she's not going to accept any of this stuff that I've been doing. And I'm not good at drawing, and I'm not fast, and so this is a real setback for me.
That's brutal.
This is going to be a real weekend for me.
That's
Oh, man.
Oh, buddy, sorry.
You got the practice in.
Yeah, the second time around will be just so much better.
Ooh.
But not faster.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
All right, Mira, what do you got for us?
Well, I had a problem with my email this week. I don't know what happened to it. I had my computer sent out all kinds of weird messages to all kinds of people that I haven't contacted for years. And so I had to deal with all them. But that wasn't really my mistake. Just ate up a lot of time.
Yeah, it was one of those vacation responder things. And it just went off and sent it to so many.
What did it say? What did the message say?
I decided not to register for your seminar or something.
Yeah. It went out to. We've had multiple, I think 30 calls this week. Not 30.
Calls?
We've had calls come in where they're like, "Hey, I just got this email from Mira. I haven't spoken to her for 18 years,
and I'm not giving a seminar, so I don't know. I don't know what she's talking about.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
That was annoying. Yes.
Well,
our inboxes have been flooded for the past week.
That's hilarious.
And my
Very
junk
nice.
mail
That's a good
is
one.
already too much, and it was just way over.
You've got over 40,000 emails.
Oh,
I
man.
think, right? 45,000.
Today?
No, not today. Well, maybe today.
So, Mira, I don't know if Toshi told you, but when I asked you to be on the podcast, and you said, "Yeah, send me an email, but if I don't respond, just send me another email because my inbox has a lot of emails in it."
Junk in it.
And
yes.
so when Toshi gave me the tour, and I found out he was your grandson, I came up to Toshi after the tour and I said, "Listen, I'm going to send your grandmother an email, and if it gets lost in her inbox, I need you to grease the skids a little bit and like whisper in her ear about the podcast in case it gets lost."
Yeah.
Did you have to do that, or did?
He sent me a copy of the mail.
I've been keeping track of our emails.
You're a good man, Toshi. You're
Thank
a good
you,
man.
Toshi.
Appreciate you.
So basically, we owe this episode to Toshi indirectly.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
This was a fantastic conversation. It was really wonderful. It was really
amazing
illuminating.
To hear all of this
Yeah.
from you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks
guys for
having
taking the
us.
time to chat with us.
Oh, it was fun. Thank you.
It was brilliant to get to know all of you. And Mira, if they want to get in touch with you regarding furniture or to learn more Nakashima, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
Inquiring on the website, probably?
Well, yeah, visit our website first. It's
Okay.
nakashimawoodworkers.com. And then I think there's a link that they could contact.
Yeah, there's a link that says make an inquiry. It goes to our info email, and then
Perfect.
it'll most likely be responded by one of our sales team, including myself or my mom.
Or it'll
Perfect.
get forwarded to the design department, which is
So
3 of us.
So if they address it to the the ice cream dictator, well, would that be the secret
Dear
code
ice
so they
cream
know?
dictator.
Toshi, I'm going to send you an email this week with that as the
That's
title.
fun. Yeah. Listen, I am the king of Klondikes, the ice cream dictator.
These are brilliant
Toshi, you
names.
got to start a T-shirt line, buddy.
Yeah.
King of Klondikes.
Yeah.
King of Klondikes.
I would wear that to work. They would.
Oh man.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well-
we have a T-shirt wearing contest, and people come in with all kinds of stuff on their shirts.
Amazing. I'm
Toshi,
gonna
we have
make
no dress
you
code.
just a Klondike bar with a crown.
That'd be great.
Toshi's going to win.
That's a good Halloween concert.
That's
Yeah.
a strong one.
Well, thank you again for coming on the
Yeah.
show. I cannot express how interesting it was to get an inside view into your family's heritage, this wonderful company. I'm almost at a loss for words, but I'll just end with thank you very, very much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah, it was fun.
And thank you, Toshi, for bringing your computer, because mine didn't work.
Once again, Toshi saves the day.
Toshi
Yep.
saves the day, man.
It's a 5-minute drive.
All right, everyone.
All right.
Well, we
Thank
hope you
you.
enjoyed the Master Series today, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See you next time.
Goodbye. Thank you.